You are listening to the weekly Dartscast. 1 hour 90.
Hello and welcome to an episode of the weekly Dartscast, sponsored by Dartwolf. I'm Alex Moss, and alongside me, my co-host, he's flying in our Premier League picks, but I'm not sure if I can call him the Darts Strava King this week. It is Darts statistician Burton DeWitt. How are you doing?
Yeah, it is not been good weather here, so I haven't gone for a run in a few days, but it should warm up tomorrow. So I'll tomorrow as of a recording, today or yesterday by the time you're listening. So maybe I'll reclaim that title in time for the podcast to drop, but I'm doing all right. How are you, Alex?
I'm doing all right, thank you. A little bit sore from Sunday's run, but I can't complain. I was glad to get it done and enjoy some time off now. Enjoy being the Darts Strava King for a few days at least, but there's no time off for the darts. We've got lots going on. We'll be looking back at the Pro Tour weekend just gone in a moment. We've also got two guests calling in. The PDC Chief Executive Matt Porter joins us to discuss the big news that dropped last week about the changes to the World Cup. Some of your listener questions he'll be answering as well. Plus, we'll be joined by, I want to call him a product of Matthew Kinn and the Darting Nerds lockdown streams, Cameron Crabtree, who's had quite the last 6 months or so, one of the youngest winners on the Challenge Tour at just 19 back in January. He's now playing on the Pro Tours. As a result, Cameron's going to be calling in ahead of a busy 4 days for him in Germany over this weekend. But before all of that, let's look back at the latest doubleheader of Players' Championships, starting off with Saturday, a first title since becoming European champion for Ross Smith, beating Gary Anderson 8-6 in the Players' Championship 5 final. But what do you think would represent a successful follow-up season in 2023 for Ross?
Well, of course, as you mentioned, this is his first win since the European Championships, and he won Upset of the Year from us for that. And he said one of his goals for this year was to make it so that it wouldn't be Upset of the Year when he does it again. And I think that's the right attitude to have. He was building towards that. You know, the very beginning of 2022, he was playing poorly. He won the title in 2021. He emerged. He started to move into that top 32. He was looking like a player on the up, but he couldn't win a match for the first couple months of the year. And he wasn't playing well as well. It wasn't like he was getting unlucky. He was playing poorly. Of the top 32 players in the world, he was probably the one who was other than Glenn Durrant, because Glenn Durrant did start the year in the top 32, he was probably the player playing the worst of anyone at the beginning of the year. And that's why he ended up missing out on the world match play, even though when the season started, he was safely in the spots. But he started to find the form as we got into late spring, early summer, played his way into the World Grand Prix, ended up qualifying for nearly half the Euro Tours, made a couple of quarterfinals, which is how he got into the European Championships, and he was playing good again by that time. But it was still obviously an upset. Since winning the European Championships, though, he has looked every part a top 16 or at least a top 20, 25 player. And he's been consistently doing that. So far this year in Players' Championships, he's 18th in averages, ahead of the likes of Michael van Gerwen, ahead of the likes of Damon Hatta, one of the players who we thought was going to be ready to win at the European Championships, but didn't. He's been playing at near that top 16 level. Obviously, at the World Championships, okay, he ran out of steam, and we'll get to the player who knocked him out in the next question, Dirk van Duijvenbode. He did run out of steam the last couple legs of that marathon match that went to the tiebreak, but he was absolutely brilliant that entire tournament, including that match. He's been off to a pretty good start this year as well. Ross Smith looks a top 16 player. Guess what? Having won that title, now he is. What does he do for an encore? I think he has to keep winning titles. Winning the Odd Players Championship event isn't going to be enough. This was, it's now 3 years in a row he's won a title, but it's only one title a year. That Players Championship in 2021, his breakthrough, the European Championship last year, and now this one. I think the goal is win a couple of these this year, and I don't think that's unrealistic. He's the type of player who can, when he's just playing okay, still average in the mid-90s. I don't think he was brilliant on his way to the title, at least not in most of the matches, but even still not playing brilliant, he was still averaging over 90 in every single match, including over 100 his first two. His worst match was against the top seed, Luke Humphries, where he averaged 91. But by beating the top seed, that in essence made him the top seed, and he did what I complimented Chris Dobie for doing at the Masters, what I've complimented Geraint Price for doing. After that match, he averaged mid to high 90s every single match, 99 against Dimitri, 98 against Nathan, 97 against Martin Schindler, and then beat Gary Anderson, averaging just a tad under 94. That consistency, even when he's not playing at his best, is going to mean he's a force to be reckoned with. And when he is playing at his best, which I don't think we've seen quite so far this year, he's averaging closer to 105. I think that's now the goal, is to more often play at his best. He's obviously shown that he can play his B game or his A- game and win a title. That was the key thing to come out of Saturday. It's now being able to more often bring that A game, like he was doing on television at the end of last year when he was looking like one of the best players in the world for some time. And it would be a successful follow-up. Maybe he doesn't have to win another major, although obviously that's his mindset and that's his goal, and that's a good mindset and goal to have. But to make sure that it isn't just the one title of 2023, it's the two or even the three. Win another Players' Championship, win a title on stage, whether it's a Euro Tour or another major. I think that makes it a successful year. Aim for 3 titles this year, wherever they are. Doesn't really matter. It's still a year of growth if he can get multiple titles.
Yeah, I think that's a fair assessment. And as you said, with the rankings, Ross Smith is now in the top 16 at the start of the season. He was at number 17 in the world. The gap to the top 16, it was less than 10 grand. So that would probably have been one of Ross Smith's goals for this year, was to crack that top 16. And you go back 12 months earlier, the start of last season, he was at number 33 and got into the top 32 last year. That major title got him into the top 20, and now he's into that top 16. And I think another rankings that he'll be looking at is the Pro Tour, because going into this past weekend, he was outside that top 32. So the title that he won on Saturday, he did it as an unseeded player. And as you mentioned, beat the top seed there, Luke Humphries, in that tournament. So I think he'll want to get into that top 16 on the Pro Tour, be seeded for those Euro Tour events, because the defence of his European Championship, it all comes down to money won on the Euro Tour, and he's done pretty well so far in those qualifiers. I think he's qualified for 4 out of the 6 Euro Tour events so far, but he'll want to have those Mondays off. He'll want to just focus on playing the Players' Championships and head back on Sunday, not have to worry about playing on the Monday. So I think he's up to number 22 now on that Pro Tour list, and looking at the race for the next lot of seeds for the Euro Tours 9 and 10 later in the year, he's at number 17. So at that time of the year, he's going to be in with a real shout of being a seed, because you're going to see players in that top 16 perhaps not enter those tournaments. And even getting into that top 16, he's very close to Andrew Gilding, who's in that 16th spot. So he's in a good position with that title that he's won at the weekend. And I think a lot of it this year is going to be how high he can go in the rankings overall, because the rest of 2023, he's not going to be defending a lot of prize money from 2 years ago. I think it's less than £90,000. And you compare that to the rest of the top 16, that is the least amount of money to defend. And Dirk is next on that list with 94 grand. So I think a successful follow-up 2023 for Ross Smith, it is going to be cementing his place in the top 16 and seeing if he can make a big push and get into the top 10, maybe the top 8. He's someone that had that big breakthrough last year, winning a major. As you touched on, winning our upset of the year. He was also nominated for Performance of the Year because of just how well he played that weekend. He was a well-deserved winner, one of the most unlikely winners of a major we've seen in recent times, but take nothing away from him. It was a fully deserved victory for him to get that title, and he was in the conversation for the Premier League and as a major winner. But I think the early exits he had in the last 3 TV events after that probably did cost him in the end. But he is an entertaining player to watch. The 180s, he's right up there with one of the best 180 hitters in the game. I think his pace of play as well, he's not the fastest player, but he throws at a pace I feel that's quite watchable, and it gels quite well with a lot of other players. So he missed out on the back-to-back titles at the weekend, despite averaging 106 in that game with Luke Humphries on the Sunday. But yeah, I think he'll be pleased. He's got a title under his belt already this year. I think, yeah, a good aim is to get multiple titles this year, and if he can get some deep runners in the majors, it all adds up to maybe making that push into the top 10 come the end of the year.
You mentioned he went out on Sunday in a Very high quality match, averaged nearly 170. He was averaging 115 halfway through that match. But that opened the door for the man who beat him at the World Championships to win his second title of 2023, Dirk van Duijvenbode. I guess I have to ask, is the next natural step for the aubergine a title on stage, and does that happen this year?
Yeah, I think it does. And I should mention as well our 2 questions of the week on Twitter as well. We asked our listeners the same question, but about both of the title winners of the weekend, Ross Smith and Dirk van Duijvenbode. Will they be in the top 10 on the PDC Order Merit at the end of this season? Well, looking at the poll at the moment, these are running for the rest of the week, so go and have your say. But as far as Ross Smith, 29% of you going with yes, 71% of you going with no, and the results flip the other way for Dirk, 77% of you going with yes and 23% of our listeners going with no. But it's fair to say both of them are in the mix, aren't they? Ross is in that top 16 now, as we mentioned. Dirk is at number 11, and they are the 2 players with the least amount of prize money dropping off between now and the end of the season. So you look at the Order Merit post-World Championship, still very early days, but Dirk is at number 8, Ross is at number 11. So they're going to be in and around it, I think, and a lot of it is going to come down to how they perform on the stage. And with Dirk, the next natural step now is to pick up that first stage title. He's got 5 floor titles to his name, 2 already this year. And of course, not every player makes these steps, and we'll borrow a word from Andrew Gilden on last week's show, incrementally, as he put it. But his first PDC title was a major. So he's done something that Dirk hasn't done yet, and that's win a title on the stage. And we've seen Dirk come close before. He's got to 3 finals on TV. The World Series finals last year, lost in a last leg to Gerwyn Price, but I think he's going to be a brave person to back against him, ticking that box off at some point over the next 9 months, because he is someone that we're seeing now regularly go deep in these stage events. You look at last year, he got to the quarterfinals or better 6 times on TV and 3 times on the Euro Tour. And in fairness, the Euro Tour, he was in all 13 of them. So you probably did expect a better return in terms of quarterfinals, but he did lose in the last 16 7 times last year. So fell at that hurdle just before quite often. And this year already, the Masters quarterfinals, the first Euro Tour quarterfinals, the UK Open, lost a close one to Nathan Aspinall. That was the last 32. So he's been playing fairly well. And as I say, 2 floor titles this year. That's already equalled his personal best for PDC titles in 1 year. And just looking at what he did on Sunday as well, the 115 average against one of our guests, Cameron Crabtree, followed it up with that 98 average at a 6-0 win, and then to beat Michael van Gerwen as well. And I had a look at that game as well, because Dirk's record against MVG, like many players, to be fair, doesn't make for very good reading. But you look at how he won that game as well, and he did perform very well. Some big shots in there, a 1-2-1, a 1-4-6 to break, had a 11 dart leg in there, a 1-5-2 to finish it off at the end as well. So some big shots, and that's what he was doing in the final as well, the 1-4-2, the 1-4-8 early on in that game with Ryan Searle, and could have been 5-3 down in that final, but comes back, wins that 8th leg, and then goes on a run, 14-14, 12-12 to win the title, and the semi-final as well. Some very good legs in there to beat Luke Humphreys in a last leg. And he said in his interview afterwards it was his first weekend in 18 months that he's not had an injury. So that's got to be a worry for the rest of the field. These floor titles, I think they're just going to build up more confidence for Dirk, and I don't think it's going to be too long before he is lifting a physical trophy and not a tablet with his Dart Connect average for the day on it.
Yeah, I fully agree. I can't recall if I said at the beginning of the year that I thought he'd win a major this year. I think I did. I'd have to go back and listen. It's so close to happening. He's now been to 2 major finals in the last 3 years. He hasn't had that same success in the Euro Tour. Now, part of that is because up until the last couple of years, he almost never qualified for the Euro Tour. But as you mentioned, he's now into the seeds. He played in every Euro Tour for the last couple of years. He hasn't gone deep in them, but he's had some really tough losses. He lost of those third-round matches you mentioned, 3 of them he lost in last leg deciders. In another, he lost 6-4 despite averaging 104 against Johnny Clayton. One of his quarterfinals, he averaged 105, but lost to Michael van Gerwen. He's played well and hasn't gotten over the line, but he's been playing even better, I think, in the last 6 months, and at least more consistently. We've seen really good performances, which is why he's won 5 Players' Championships in the last couple of years. And we've seen him get hot for short spurts of time. I don't mean like a few legs. I mean for a few weeks. That's put him in that position. But I think the consistency is as what's really emerged. And that's why last year he made at least the quarterfinals in 5 majors. That's half the majors he played in. He made it to at least the quarterfinals, including half the ranking majors as well. He's made the quarterfinals of the Masters to start this year. He's really come on leaps and bounds. And I just don't see how he doesn't win a title this year. He's in the top 10 in averages. He's playing at a top 10 level. And as you mentioned, as things currently stand, he's going to be just outside the top 10 at the end of the year, or just inside the top 10, depending on how things go. But I think he will be in the top 10. I think he will get a title. I don't know if it'll be a Euro Tour. I don't know if it'll be a major. Very well could be both, because he's good enough. And he was only a leg away from winning a major last year. I don't know what more to say. He is one of, is he one of the 8 best players in the world? I think he is. I think he's one of those players who, if we're just saying who are the best, he has to be selected for the Premier League. He obviously didn't do enough to be selected, because I don't think he was even the first person out. He was probably the second or third out last year. And not getting over that line in the World Series final might have been what kept him out, because if he won a major, maybe that would have put him over the top. If he was able to go deeper in a couple of those Euro Tours, maybe that would put him over the top. But I can't see him dropping out of the top 16 of the Pro Tour Order of Merit anytime soon. And if he doesn't drop out of the top 16 of the Pro Tour Order of Merit, what does that mean? That means he's going to be in every single Euro Tour yet again this year. That'll be 13 opportunities to get that stage win, and he's going to be in every televised event. The only one that's not a guarantee is the Grand Slam, because he'll have to either he might still get in by winning a couple Players' Championships, because as things currently stand, he would be the first player in because he has multiple Players' Championship titles. But if more than 16 people get in through majors or Euro Tours, he would have to win a stage event or make another major final to get there. But everything else he's going to be in, which means that's pretty much 22 opportunities to get a stage title this year. And is he good enough to win 1 out of every 20 events that he's on stage? Yeah, I think he is. And he's playing well enough too as well. So I'm going to say yes, he's going to win his first stage event this year. Maybe he'll even win a second, because I would not be at all surprised to see him win both the Euro Tour and a major, or to do something kind of like what Luke Humphries did last year and just win a slew of Euro Tours on the spin. I mentioned how he's gotten more consistent, but that doesn't change the fact that he can get hot for a few weeks at a time. And if he gets hot for a few weeks at a time and there's a few Euro Tours, he can do what Luke did and win 3 of them on the bounce. I'm not saying he will, but he can. And if he can, then at some point that will happen. And I think that will happen this year.
And now move on to our first guest on this week's show, and it is with the PDC Chief Executive, Matt Porter.
I'm joined today by the Chief Executive of the PDC, Matt Porter. Matt, how are you?
I'm well, Burton. How are you?
I'm also well. Thank you for joining us. Last time we had you on the show was in October of last year, right towards the end, the best end of 2022 with all the television events. And you said that 2022 was a reset year after the challenges of the pandemic the previous 2 years. How do you reflect on the year as we've now turned the page into 2023?
Well, I think it did what we set out for it to achieve, which was to get us back to where we were pre-pandemic with a full calendar and as much activity as possible. Obviously the Asian tour was slower getting going, but apart from that, we were up and running pretty much everywhere else where we had been before COVID, and we've been able to take that on this year. So, that's firmly behind us now, and it wasn't a time that we'd particularly want to dwell on for too long, even though I thought we dealt with it well. It's certainly something that I'm happy to see consigned to history. So let's look forwards and onwards and upwards.
Indeed. And you mentioned the Asian tour. We'll come around to that and some of the other regional tours in a few questions. But when we had you on last time, it was during the World Grand Prix. And I know you often get asked about when or if the event will ever return to Ireland. The City West is unavailable, and you said other venues are not quite suitable. Is there any update on the PDC bringing that event or some other events to Ireland, or is it still the same?
Yeah, it's still the same conundrum with venues. Unfortunately, Ireland isn't blessed with as many arenas as some other places. So it's a challenge for us, but we are still keen to take us, some additional content back to Ireland. It's just a case of finding the right venue, and I've got a long list to plough through, some of which we've looked at and crossed off, some of which we've looked at and put question marks next to, and some of which we haven't looked at yet. So it's an ongoing process. It won't happen this year, but I won't rule it out for 2024.
All right, and we will look onwards and upwards, like you said, but two more questions looking back. There was still a vacant World Championship spot when we had you on last time. It ended up going to the winner of the Women's World Match Play, Fallon Sherrick. I know there was a bit of a mixed reaction, especially on social media, with some people saying that Fallon got shoehorned in after failing to finish in the top two. Can you walk us through how the PDC decided to come to that decision? Of course, we know that the Women's World Match Play winner will get a spot this year. That's been announced.
Yeah, I mean, we probably didn't handle it as well as we could have done in terms of the timing of the announcement, but we'd always had it in mind as an option. And when we discussed with Sky and some of the other event stakeholders about the progression of darts, it was deemed that a third female spot, a third women's spot was a positive thing for the event. So we went down that route. Some people got very upset, but I'm sure they're all okay now.
Hope so.
So do I. If they're not, then we've got a problem.
Well, it is now 2023, and I do want one question looking back so far this year, because it started out with the final 3 days at Ali Pali on the 1st through 3rd of January, and what a few days that was, especially the viral moment, the 9-dart leg. I had friends in the U.S. who were sending me pictures of that who have never watched darts before. In terms of numbers, where does that stack up in terms of viral moments in PDC? And is there anyone that you've spotted talking about it that surprised you the most?
Well, funnily enough, literally just as you phoned me, I was watching it because I was sending it to somebody in another country where we're looking to do an event. So it's just a seminal moment. I think it probably eclipses anything else we've had on social media by some stretch. I don't have the numbers in front of me, but I know our media team got very excited about the reach that it got. And yeah, look, we've seen the celebrities and the media personalities who've referenced it and included it on their podcasts and their shows and their reels and everything like that. So I think it just transcended where we normally reach as a sport. It was a moment of genuine excitement. It was a moment of drama, a moment of atmosphere, and a moment that really just showcased darts in a perfect way. You can't script those sort of things. You can't plan for them. You can't expect them. But when they come along, you have to take advantage of them. So it's something that we use as a marketing tool now, and it's something that we're very proud of. And I think both the players involved in that moment will, I'm sure in years to come, look back on it and think that was pretty special.
Of course, a showcase moment in the showcase event. But of course, one of the other showcase events is the Premier League. Some years the 8 or 10, depending on how many at the time, pick themselves. This year is probably not one of those years. If you ask 10 different people, you've got in 10 different lineups. Two related questions on it. Was this the hardest year picking the lineup that you've experienced? And for our German listeners, how close was Gabriel Clemens to getting selected after that remarkable run at Ali Pali he had?
It was definitely the hardest year for selection. Though, as you rightly say, you asked 10 different people for a lineup and you would have got 10 different answers. And I think that's testimony to the strength in depth we've got beneath that elite four who picked themselves. I think that Gabriel wasn't perhaps as close as some people may have said. Look, people were just assuming that because he's German and Germany is a growing market for us, that we were just going to put him in straight away. But as we've been very clear on saying, we put in players who were regularly featuring in the latter stages of our major tournaments in the second half of 2022. And the four guys who we picked, their records in terms of reaching finals, semis, quarters stands up for itself. So Gabriel had a great run in the World Championship, and who's to say if he'd got to the final it wouldn't have been a different story, or obviously won the event. But I don't think he would argue, or anybody would argue, that he'd done more over the period leading up to the Premier League than the guys that we selected.
That's fair enough. Now, of course, start of 2023. in between Ali Pally and the Masters were 2 World Series events. Usually it's been a quiet period in the PDC. There's obviously Q School for those trying to get on tour, but this year those 2 World Series events. What was the reaction, especially for first one in Bahrain, and any indication on whether we'll see more World Series events, including those back in January 2024?
Yeah, I mean, with both of those events, we work with external promoters who obviously have a lot of control over the date, or a lot of say in the date that we pick. Our calendar is hugely limited by the Premier League. I mean, the Premier League being on a Thursday night essentially wipes out 4 months worth of weekends for overseas events, because you just physically can't get the players there on time. You know, nobody wants to be flying the players in on a Friday morning to play Friday evening. That's just not good preparation for them, or it's too risky for the tournament with bad weather and travel problems and things like that. So we are really limited on the weekends that we can play World Series events, and those January weekends were both clear in the calendar. Obviously, Michael van Gerwen had a holiday pre-booked, so he missed Bahrain. That's fair enough. But, you know, the tournaments survive without 1 or 2 players if they're unable to play, because people in wherever we go, they go to see the event and see a range of players. So I'm pleased with how they both went. Bahrain, obviously, the crowd wasn't thousands and thousands of people. There was hundreds of people there, and they enjoyed it, a mixture of both expats and locals. And then the Copenhagen event is pretty well established now.
Now, speaking of Copenhagen event, that was, of course, a World Series event, but there are now the Euro Tour up and running. We've already had one event, as we're speaking, qualifiers for the 6th event going on. And you hinted to us when we had you on last time that there would be changes coming in terms of players withdrawing because you weren't happy with all the buys. I think there was one event where there were 4 or 5 withdrawals near the end of the year. We've now got penalties in place and a reserve list through the ProTour Order of Merit. How did those decisions come about, and do you expect the penalties to be enough of a deterrent to stop players from having late withdrawals?
Well, I hope so. I mean, the penalties were there before, but they were quite minor compared to what they are now. So we've reinforced that, and we've spoken to a lot of the players and just said to them about the importance of schedule management. You know, as I've said plenty of occasions, there's no pressure on players to play in every event. We encourage players to manage their schedule and to take weekends off, particularly those guys who are in the Premier League and playing every week. So it's not a problem if you don't want to play, but don't decide you don't want to play at midnight on Thursday night or 8 o'clock on Friday morning, because number one, it's unprofessional. Number two, it's not fair on the other players, who could have played in place of you. And number three, it makes the event look, that reduces the event's credibility. If there's buys, as you rightly say, there was an event last year. I think it was the Belgian one with 3 or 4 buys on the Friday afternoon. It's not a good look for the event, particularly now as we're getting more interest from broadcasters and selling more tickets. So we just want players to plan in advance when they do and when they don't want to play. And bearing in mind, of course, look, somebody can always get ill last minute, or somebody's flight can always be cancelled last minute. There's always issues like that. And we would never unduly punish a player in a circumstance that was out of their control. But we just don't want people to qualify, take it for granted that they're in the event, and then shortly beforehand say, oh, no, I can't be bothered, I'm not going to go to that one.
Now, so far, we've seen some really good starts for some of the new tour card holders this year, but there's 2 of them we haven't seen play yet, Corey Cadby and Christian Perez. Believe that might be visa-related issues for both of them. Are you able to give us an update on them at this time?
Yeah, I mean, they're both going through the process of obtaining UK visas. There's a visa which you can come in on for a short period of time or for an irregular period of time, and I think they both had that. But in order for them to come and relocate over here to play on the Pro Tour regularly, they need to get a more permanent visa. So that process is ongoing. It's possibly taking a little bit longer than either of them would have liked. It's been best part of 2 months now since Q School, but hopefully it'll be resolved shortly.
Yeah, I can't believe it's been 2 months already since Q School. We'll go away from the Pro Tour for a second. In the past couple weekends, we've seen a record number of entries, over 140 for the women's series. We also saw on the return of the Asian Tour almost double the amount that there had been pre-pandemic. What's your reaction to those 2 numbers, and what future growth do you see for both the women's series and the Asian Tour at this time?
Well, I think it's testimony to the commitment of players, both the women who want to play on the women's series and the players in Asia who've been so patient waiting for the Asian Tour to start up again. They're big commitments, and I think the rewards that are on offer are not going to be accessible to a lot of the players on those tours, but they play for other reasons as well. They play because they enjoy it. They play because they enjoy the atmosphere and they appreciate the professionalism that goes into the setup at the events, and they want to progress themselves and see how far they want to go. So we'll just keep providing the opportunities, and I think the players will appreciate that and step up. The prize money is good, and the number of opportunities is good. That with playing two events on a day gives you double jeopardy. So I think there's a good positive feeling around a lot of our secondary tours at the moment, and we just want to make sure that we keep delivering a high standard of events and regular activity to encourage more and more players to play.
Now we'll continue getting some frequent flyer miles on this interview. We talked about almost half the world so far, but big news as well in the past recently, both involving North America and Africa. New 3-year deal between the PDC and the CDC, as well as the new partnership with the African Continental Tour starting up. We'll start, though, with the PDC and the CDC. How important is the deal for continuing the push into the North American market?
Yeah, I mean, look, the CDC is the organisation in North America if you're a serious steel tip player. So we're very committed to them. They do a great job. I think it's been borne out by the growth of the US Masters since it moved to New York, and the number of North American tour card holders that we've seen in recent years as well, many of whom have put in a great commitment by almost commuting forward and backwards across the Atlantic. So the CDC is continuing to grow. We're continuing to help them as best we can, and long may that continue. And then for the African Darts Group, which is Devon Peterson's fledgling organisation, it's really a toe in the water. Africa's been a barren ground for us for many years now. Devon's the right guy. He's got the right mentality. He's got the right passion and enthusiasm for taking darts forward, not just there, but across Africa. We've introduced him to a number of people in different countries on the continent, and hopefully they can put something together between them and grow. But let's be realistic about that, that one, and not put too much pressure on that. I think if you look at where the Asian Tour, where the DPA, DPNZ, the Nordic and Baltic Tour and the CDC they're well established and they've been operating for a while now. So don't expect miracles from Africa, but hopefully baby steps and some steady growth over the next few years.
Now, we'll come on to some listener questions in a bit, but have to ask about the big news last week, the announcement regarding the World Cup. I would assume our listeners all know by now, but the big news is that it's expanded to 40 from the 32 that it's been for almost a decade now, as well as that it will be entirely pairs. Obviously, I think this has been a popular announcement. It's something that I know we've talked about. A lot of people on social media have asked for quite some time now. But how did that decision come about to change it to pairs only?
We just sat down and talked about it. I don't want to make it sound boring, but that's kind of how we come up with our formats and our schedules and things like that. We sit down and we have an adult conversation about the options to see what might be best to implement. And we know that a lot of public opinion has been pro doubles in recent years, and it certainly adds an identity to the World Cup, which other events don't have. I think there's an argument to say that the best of 7 format that we've had before generates a lot of excitement, because in those short matches you can have upsets. And will we get that in the longer matches? Well, maybe not, but time will tell. But it was worth a shake-up, and as we expanded to 40 countries, we were pleased to bring the group stages in as well, so that the countries, say the lesser countries maybe who have long trips to get to Germany, at least get two bites of the cherry rather than just one go on the stage. So that was an important development not to be overlooked as well. And we thought perhaps if we're going to change a little bit of the format of the tournament, why don't we change quite a lot of it? So it's a pretty major shake-up, really.
One of the additions with that expansion to 40 is that one of the spots is not yet known, as there'll be a qualifier for Central and Latin America. We have a listener question from a Turkish citizen, Alperin. What is the process for selecting countries for the World Cup of Darts, and what should other countries do to be in the conversation to get selected in the future?
Yeah, I mean, we do get a lot of approaches from countries who are not involved. We invite countries where we see there being darts activity that we're part of the process of. So it's either players coming from those countries to compete in our events, or are we seeing some broadcaster interest? Are we seeing people pitching to host events on other regional tours, and there's all sorts of different factors. But what you're seeing in Latin America with the qualifier for this year is something that we are considering rolling out further for future years to make it a truly open global event, rather than closed on an invitation-only basis. So I think it's something that we'll watch and see how that goes and how the format goes, because it's relatively tricky with pairs. You don't tend to have pre-existing darts pair teams in many places, if you know what I mean. So would people choose themselves who they played with? Would it come off rankings? Would there be a draw for it? There's all sorts of different ways of looking at that. So let's see how it goes over in Central and Latin America this year, and then see what our options are for some spots in the tournament in the future.
A couple more listener questions. This one comes from Zach Clark. We talked about the Premier League already with the selection, but another thing that has to be selected each year is the venues. We've seen obviously in recent years, Rotterdam, we've seen Berlin. Could we see a Premier League night in Belgium or somewhere else in Europe in the near future?
Possibly. It's not something that I don't think we're not rushing to do that. Our host broadcaster for the event is Sky Sports, and it's obviously a UK broadcaster, so we have to be mindful of that. And to sort of decamp the whole operation to Europe for one night is a costly and time-consuming process. So we're happy to do it in the Netherlands and Germany. And don't get me wrong, they're making great strides in Belgium. The interest levels there are astronomical now compared to a few years ago. But we won't just be taking it to new countries without real compelling reason to do so. So I'm not ruling it out, but it's not a short-term priority.
And another question, this one comes from Ben Hutter. Slightly related question because it also involves events in Europe, but it deals with open draw events, especially on the back end of another highly successful and entertaining and wide open UK Open. Do you think we could see another open draw event added to the calendar, perhaps in Germany, the Netherlands, or even a return of the US Open? Or do you think that would take away something from the uniqueness of the UK Open?
Yeah, well, I think that certainly applies. The drama of the draw for the UK Open makes it really watchable. And also, for us to do that, we would then either have to bring in another new event, which we're not really planning to do because we haven't really got enough time to do all the events we want to do anyway, or we'd have to drastically alter the format of one of the existing events. So, no, I think, look, if it's a ranking event, then the reason it's a ranking event and the reason you qualify the way you qualify is because you deserve that spot. So the uniqueness of the UK Open, I think, is in that, as you say, use that word unique.
And lastly, this question, it is a listener question, but it's also it's a question that comes from one of the markers and officials on the PDC Pro Tour, Owen Binks. He, of course, is a Colchester fan. We know you're a director for Leyden Orient. He mentions the background here mentions that you guys are in first, and we're not even mentioning where Colchester is.
No, but they're miles off it.
But do you think Colchester United could nick a cheeky point at Brisbane Road later this month to make Owen happy?
No, let's hope not. Owen, look, I'll buy you a drink at an event if that makes you happy, but you can't have a point off as we need to win the league or get promoted. So, sorry, mate.
Well, Matt, thank you so much for joining us, and hope that everything continues to go well this year.
Anytime. My pleasure, guys. Nice to talk to you.
Free beer, anyone? Now that I've got your attention, the weekly Dartscast are excited to be partnering up with the guys at Beer52 to offer our listeners a free case of beers. Head on over to beer52.com/darts and cover the postage cost of £5.95 to claim your free case of beers from our good friends at Beer52. I've just got on board with Beer52, and as a member each month, they send me a case of unique and varied beers from a different part of the world. Imagine that. Each month trying out beers from a different country. In the last 10 years, Beer52 have been to 40 different countries, including the US, Australia and Germany, and they've also included a range of breweries in the UK too. So, to claim your free case of beers, go to beer52.com/darts. Thank you for listening, and enjoy the darts and enjoy your beers, and let's get back to the rest of the show.
Thanks again to Matt for joining us now. We've just spoke to the PDC chief exec about the big news that dropped after we recorded last week. Let's talk about it ourselves. 40 teams, a group stage to start and pairs only. Some big changes coming to the PDC World Cup of Darts this year. What did you make of the changes?
Well, I mean, I can't complain. This is almost exactly what I have been asking for. And I know a lot of other people have been asking for some time. I thought that the World Cup, I mean, obviously to begin with, it is a unique event because you're representing your country, not yourself. It's the one event where that's the case, although some of the Euro Tour and World Championship crowds would have you believe maybe you are always representing your country, even when it's not the World Cup. But it's not supposed to be that way. This is supposed to be that one time where you represent your country. It's the one time we see Michael Van Geuren not wearing green. It's been the one time we've seen Dave Chisnell not wear yellow, except in that one photo that Dan Dawson loves to share on Twitter of him. Well, anyway, I'm sure everyone's seen that photo. But it's the one time we get to see them on stage wearing something other than the normal shirt because they're wearing the shirt of their country. So it does have its unique flavor. And it's also that one event where you can win and not hit the winning double because you have your partner who might win his tie, or even if it's in a doubles decider, be the one to hit it. So there is a unique aspect to begin with. But in the end, most of the matches after the first round have been just shorter versions of any other match. Best out of 7, 501 singles, see what happens. And that took away some of the uniqueness from it. And it took away some of that element of it being a team event. And the move now to every match being pairs, I think gives it that unique flavor in the way that it's supposed to have that unique flavor. It really makes it that every single leg is now a team event. And yes, when you're not throwing, when it's your partner's turn to throw, you can sit back and wait, but it's still a team game at all times. If you're on 136, but you missed the first treble and you hit the second treble, you have to think about who your partner is. Are you going to go single 16 or are you going to hit a single 20 to leave double 18? You're thinking not just about what you want to do to put yourself in position to win, but also what your partner needs so that he or she will have the best opportunity to come out and win the leg on the next turn. So it does add a different dynamic, and having it be entirely pairs, I think, is the right call, and one that I know a lot of other people have been requesting for some time. But also expanding the field, I think, is a good thing because it brings more countries into the fray, and it allows us to see, well, one, the return of France for the first time in nearly a decade, which makes sense now that they have a tour card holder, but also more opportunities to make sure that every country that is giving the PDC, has someone giving the PDC a go, can be represented. I wish there had been another spot or two for Asia, and maybe this is something to come in the future with a qualifier. I wish there was another spot or two for Latin America. Right now, it's just one spot for Latin America to be determined by a qualifier to see which country comes through, as opposed to just Brazil getting the spot as it has been for the past few years. There is no qualifier for now for Asia, but as you just heard from Matt Porter, he did hint that there might be more qualifiers in the future. We'll see how having a qualifier this year goes, and we'll see what countries show interest in the future. I like that Bahrain's been given a chance in this, as obviously Bahrain is trying to get more events. It's not just in the PDC, but they've had WDF events recently as well. So a country that, at least at some levels, trying to put some commitment, and Iceland, obviously, for a long time for a commitment, is now paying off with a spot in the World Cup. I can't really complain at all. I think this was the right call. There is ways still to improve it further. Having a qualification system is one of those ways, but step by step. And I think in a few years, we will see that. Obviously, there will still be countries that are thrown in to begin with, but maybe there'll be 4 or 6 spots in the near future, or 8 spots that you have to earn through a qualifier. And I think that is the next step to take to really make this event a true World Cup.
Yeah, I can't argue with that. And you've just got to look at the reaction on social media from darts fans. I think universally it was a very popular announcement and something that like yourself, like me, like many people have called for a long time. The now old World Cup format has been in place since 2014, so almost 10 years, and it was pairs matches from the second round onwards. Sometimes they were hard to find, weren't they? It always felt strange to me that you'd start a tournament with all those pairs matches, the first round, 16 games, all pairs, and then you'd go sometimes whole sessions or whole rounds with no pairs games as the format changed to the 2 singles games, and if they were split then you would have a pairs decider. And like you mentioned there, one of the big draws of the World Cup was seeing the pairs and the format and everything that format brought, because we don't see that anywhere else in the PDC, and even in the WDF there's pairs events that go alongside the singles events on the weekends, but you've got to go looking for them on the streams. The WDF, they don't have a World Masters pairs or a World Championship pairs, which I think would be a great idea to do. But for TV darts, the pairs, it's only coming from the PDC World Cup. And if you were tuning in past the first round into that second round, you were not guaranteed to see pairs matches. So, yeah, I'm pleased with the changes. As you say, we've just heard from Matt Porter. Burton, you asked him about the changes, and he said before, the PDC, they're not an organisation that's going to sit still and dig their heels in and stick with a format forever. You've only got to look at the Premier League and how that's changed over the last 20 years. The World Cup, that's exactly the same. We've seen in the early years the format changed quite a lot before sticking with the format in 2014 for a long time. But switching to the pairs only, increasing the number of teams from 32 to 40, giving the teams outside the 4 seeds, the lower ranked nations, guaranteeing them 2 games in the group stage, that more stage time, more exposure, I think can only be a good thing. And one thing I found interesting from your chat with Matt, and you just touched on it as well, was the qualifiers, because we've got this year that Latin America qualifier, and he said one thing the PDC are looking at is seeing how that qualifier plays out and potentially putting on more qualifiers so that the World Cup does become more of a global event and it is open to more countries to try and qualify. Because one of our listener questions came from a listener in Turkey, and they wanted to know, how does Turkey get into the World Cup? Well, we could see down the line a qualifier held in that part of the world for players from Turkey to get involved and try and qualify. So I think having the event, well, look less of a closed shop is going to be another good thing in the long run. And I think it's probably been lost under the initial excitement of the change to pairs only as well, is the fact that we have got that qualifier and we could see more of them in the future. But the World Cup, yeah, it was already one of my favourite events on the PDC calendar. That had been tested a little bit by the format, but I think these changes are going to make it more popular among darts fans this year. And just lastly as well, touching on the format, of course, pairs only, that does mean we are going to see longer format games. And I think when we get to the last day and the semi-finals and the final, that long format pairs between, you'd probably say that the top nations, England, Wales, Netherlands, Scotland, teams like that, seeing 4 players up on stage and how a game can change in that pairs format over a longer format, I think is going to be something to really be excited about as well.
One other thing to be excited about is how your brother does this week in the Premier League, because that's what we're coming on to now. And as you said at the beginning, you are not giving your picks this week. Not that, you could have skipped them last week. You didn't get any points. So you're going to let your brother pick in your stead this week. I'll continue to give my picks. If I have another 0-point week like I did a few weeks ago, maybe I'll ask my brother to give his picks. I don't think my brother's ever watched darts in his life. And I have 3 brothers to pick from, and I think that's the case for all 3 of them. So hopefully I don't have to go do that. But of course I can, if one fails, I can rotate through the others. But let's get on to night 7 at the Motor Point Arena in Nottingham. First matchup, Duijvenbode, just outside the top 4 after losing his first match last time. And he'll go against Nathan Aspinall, who's been doing very well, getting points all but once so far this Premier League, currently in 3rd. How do you see this one? Or I should say, how does your brother see this one?
Yeah, I've got to say I've been dreading this part of the show. And what result for you last week, Burton? Because we've got to mention that, going 4 for 4 and getting 1 perfect score. So 6 points for you, and 2 of the other 3 games you were 1 leg out. So it could have been even worse for me. And I went opposite on all your picks, so I was 0 for 4. And to give our listeners a bit of background this week, Yeah, I am passing the buck. I'm going to train in the under-21s this week. I've been dropped from the squad. I've been Gary Lineker, however you want to put it. I'm not doing the picks this week. I've asked my brother, he's more of a casual darts fan, to make my picks. And there is a bit of thinking behind it, because he was actually messaging me about the Premier League last Thursday night, talking about it. And I said, sorry, bruv, I've not got it on. I'm not watching it. So he's actually watched last week's games and has got more of an idea than I do. And in fairness, all he's got to do is get 1 out of 4 right to do better than I did last week. So just going through his picks, and the first game, Duijvenbode, Nathan Aspinall, we mentioned before on the show, the run that Dimitri's on in the Premier League. He'll win his first game 1 week. The next week he'll lose his first game. That's been going on for the first 6 weeks, and my brother's backing that to continue into a 7th week, which would mean he wins this game. And Nathan Aspinall, he's only lost his first game once in the first 6 weeks. 4 out of 6 times he's gone out in the semi-finals. Last week he had that 99 average first game, the big drop to the 75 average a game, which he'll want to forget very quickly. And I think that might have swayed my brother's pick here, because he has gone for Dimitri to win this one 6 legs to 3.
Yeah, and of course that you mentioned that 75 average, the lowest in Premier League history. I think Nathan will bounce back by 20 points or so off that. I can't imagine he'll have consecutive matches like that. And, even MVG has an occasional bad match, as I know you tweeted a few weeks ago. He went on one day, he averaged lower than Paula Jacklin did. But I can't imagine Nathan Aspinall having consecutive 75 averages. But I'm following your brother on this one. I think Dimitri will continue that trend of going out first round every other week, since he went out first round last week. This means this week he steps up. It's an important match for both of them. For Dimitri, yes, he's currently in the top 4. It's only one night that could lead to him dropping out. If Gerwyn Price makes the final and someone on 7 points wins, Nathan Aspinall suddenly finds himself in 5th. Getting a win is key each week to just keep those points totals creeping up. But for Dimitri Van den Bergh, it's even bigger, because there could be a gulf pretty soon if he continues to have early exits. And I think he's going to come out and play just a little bit better. I'm going to go 6-4 to Dimmy in what will be a fairly high quality affair.
Second game of the night, and it is the Welsh derby, Johnny Clayton against Gerwyn Price. Who wins this one?
Ooh, last week I picked everything right, but overall I don't think I've picked that well on either of these players this year. That's partially because for the first few weeks I didn't pick right on anyone, but they've been a little tough to get right. I think Gezi is coming back towards his best, and I think not having the pressure of being number 1 in the world is doing him a favor now. He's obviously lost consecutive matches first round, but overall, I think he is moving in the right direction. We saw some good results at the Pro Tour this past weekend. We've seen some good performances from him in the Premier League this year overall, last week aside. He hasn't fully reached his best. Johnny Clayton has been a bit unpredictable this year, but I think Johnny Clayton is still one of the best players in the world. He's still the player who's top of the averages in the Players' Championships this year. Gerwyn Price, of course, is now up to 2nd, believe it or not. But I think Johnny Clayton will get the points in a very nervy affair between 2 players, the winner of which may be in the top 4, although it won't be because I have Dimmy to win it and Johnny Clayton to win it as well. But it will set up a semifinal that will determine who will be in the top 4. I'm going Johnny Clayton to get over the line in a last leg decider with a 170 checkout.
Cool, that'd be something special. Well, a lot is said about this Premier League format. A lot of games being repeated each week. Well, these two have not played each other yet, I don't think, in the Premier League. They've been in the same side of the draw a few times, including last week, but they've not met yet. Gerwyn Price is in that top 4. Johnny Clayton is 6th. He's 1 point off of Gerwyn Price. So a win here for Johnny Clayton will put him above Gerwyn Price. Might not be enough to put him in the top 4. It depends on other results, but this is where we're going to go different. Well, my brother's going to go different. He's going to go with Gerwyn Price to take this one 6-4.
Now, third match of the night, it's Peter Wright, who finally got off 0 points last week with a 6-5 win that could have easily been 6-2 or 6-3, but he did finally win, and he goes against someone who did finally win last week and the week before and the week before. 3 consecutive night wins for Michael van Gerwen, who has opened up a nearly 2-week lead atop the table. How do you see this one?
Yeah, I don't think this one took too much time to think about for my brother, Michael Van Gerwen. He's won the last 3 Premier League nights. First player to do that in the Premier League, win 3 in a row. He beat Peter Wright on the way to doing that in the semi-finals last week. Peter Wright, he was in the semi-finals for the first time, got his first win, and the only bit I did see last week was the clip on social media of the darts that he was using against Gerwyn Price in the first game, and I couldn't quite believe that he got his first win of the season with those darts, because he was moving around the oche so many times, blocking the bed and having to go for different segments or find an area to throw for, but he managed to get over the line. But yeah, I agree with my brother on this one. He's gone with Michael Van Gerwen, and yeah, I think he's going to get another win against Peter right here. He's gone for 6-2 to the green man.
Well, I'm gonna go against your brother on this one. As I've been saying, I am not writing Peter Wright off. Right now, his game is probably as low as it's been in some time, and we will actually we have a listener question where we'll talk a little bit more about this in a second, so I won't go into too much detail here. But I do think that there will be another resurgence. Every time we're ready to write Peter Wright off, he does something we don't expect. I think he has another one in it. The first time he became world champion. The second time he became world champion again. He's not going to become world champion again right now because it's 10 months till the world championships, but he is going to be the best player in world darts at the moment, Michael Van Gerwen. I'm going 6-4 to Peter Wright to make it 2 weeks in a row where he's won a match.
And the last quarterfinal of the night is Chris Dobey against Michael Smith. How do you see this last one going?
Yeah, I mean, it's quickly gone sour for Chris Dobey after winning that first night. 5 consecutive weeks where he's gone out first match. Michael Smith, he put himself in a hole last year. He didn't want to do it again this year. I think Dobey's been unlucky a bit, but at the same time, he hasn't done that much. Especially last night he did really well, but especially in some of those other nights, he's not done enough at the right times, and that's why he's lost 5 in a row. He's still playing well enough, but Michael Smith is the world number 1, and it's not the player you want to draw when you've lost 5 matches in a row. I think Bully Boy's going to make sure that Dobey suffers a 6th defeat in succession. I'm going 6-4 to Michael Smith.
Yeah, my brother's got the same era, a Michael Smith win, and Chris Dobey reminds me a little bit of Mensah the first few weeks of his first season in the Premier League, and he was losing with 100-plus averages. He wasn't playing badly, but he was finding out just how tough that next level up is, playing against the elite week in, week out, when you can throw 100-plus averages, but you can come away with no points, and that's what Chris Dobey's found quite often in this Premier League season. He's not playing badly. I don't think he's been many weeks where he'll have left these arenas thinking, wow, I put in a bad one there, I didn't play well at all. But he isn't getting the results, and the games, they don't get any easier. The level of opposition, it doesn't get easier. And Michael Smith, the world champion, world number 1, yeah, I think he's going to get the win on this occasion. My brother's got it going 6-2 to the Bully Boy.
Well, that's it for the Premier League, but now we'll move on to our second interview on this week's show, and it's with winner on the Challenge Tour this year, Cameron Crabtree.
I'm pleased to say I'm joined by one of the newest title winners on the Challenge Tour, Cameron Crabtree. Thanks for the time, Cameron. How are you doing?
I'm fine, thank you. Thank you guys for having me.
Great to have you on, and looking back at the last 6 months, a 9-darter on the development tour, that monster average on your debut on the Modus League, winning a Challenge Tour, and you're now playing on the Pro Tour. Have you had time to reflect on what you've achieved in such a short period?
I'm not sure it's all settled in just yet. It's been a great few months, obviously, and I'm really enjoying it at the moment. But yeah, I think it's just something I'm trying to take in my stride and not think too much, just throw.
Lots to get to, but let's go back to the very start for you in darts, and you're still only 19, so how old were you when you first got introduced to the game?
Well, my dad's always played since I was little, but I'd never really played. Occasionally he'd throw when I went over to his, maybe during the holidays or something, but I wouldn't really get that involved. It was only when I'd moved to his and we went into lockdown, my exams were cancelled, so I was bored and there was not much to do, so I thought I'd try throwing just to pass the time, and I quite enjoyed it, and it's come on from then.
As you say, it was during the lockdowns you really got into darts, and some people would have noticed you playing on the IDL streams being run by our colleague Matthew Kiernan. I think there's a stream on YouTube of you playing in Division 6 of their lockdown league back in 2020. Before then, I'm guessing then you'd not really played much darts, and that is what got you into it.
Yeah, I think I played for maybe a week or two before I joined the league, because obviously I had to wait for the one before to end. But no, I joined straight away. I was averaging like 40 or high 30s, and at the time, I mean, now if I was to do that, obviously I wouldn't be impressed. I'd wonder what was going on, but at the time I thought it was great.
Well, obviously during that time there wasn't a lot to do. Everyone was stuck at home, so I'm guessing at that time as well you were putting in more hours on the board to try and improve on that 30-40 average.
Yeah, I was practicing a lot. As you say, there wasn't much to do. Couldn't really go out. So a lot of my time was spent just throwing, and that's probably played a big part in how quickly I've progressed.
And with these leagues as well, all the stats are there for you, so you can track your progress. You're going from averaging in the 30s and 40s to the 50s to the 60s. What was it like for you seeing that improvement in your game over a fairly short period of time?
Yeah, it was nice, and I think it helped me to progress, because as soon as I had thrown a 50, I wanted to throw a 60, or as soon as I threw a 55, I wanted to throw, I wanted to get to 60 and 65. As well as moving up the leagues, so you're playing better people, which is obviously going to make you play better, but you're also kind of setting yourself targets.
And talking of targets, another one, 2021, we see you go and play on the development tour for the first time. Back then, the PDC, they were putting on 6 tournaments a weekend, so how did you find that first taste of the whole PDC setup?
Yeah, I thought it was brilliant. As soon as it was finished, I couldn't wait to go back. Obviously, I didn't have the best results that weekend, but it was my first time going, and I hadn't played a Super League game or anything like that, other than, I think maybe 1 or 2 local league games. That was the first real games I played out in person, along with maybe a couple of IDL ones.
And then last year, 2022, we see you go to Q School for the first time. We're also trying out the Challenge Tour as well, but it is on the Development Tour where we see you have one of your first deep runs, making a semi-final. How much confidence did you take from that?
Yeah, that really helped me, I think, mentally, because I'd been playing some okay stuff in practice and at Super League, and I just didn't feel like I was taking it to Development Tour. The first two weekends, I picked up £150 in total, and then I went out to Germany, and I think I put 900 on the rankings, which was a big thing for me, and it gave me a lot of confidence that I can actually compete at that level.
And we have to mention as well the 9-darter as well on the Challenge Tour later that year. Nathan Gervin, he was running away with it 4-1 up in that race to 5, and then you throw your first 9-darter. What was that moment like?
Yeah, I think about it. Well, like, people talk about it, and I can remember hitting the first 180, and normally straight away I think like I'm on for a 9. But I was losing so badly, I didn't even think that. I just thought, like, I hope I can hit something good the next throw, because I really need it. And there was no hesitancy or anything, and I was surprised that ball went in, to be fair. It's the first time I'd ever had a dart at it. And then I jumped around a bit like an idiot, and then I think I lost 5-2.
Good times. Well, off the back of that, you get the call up for the Modus League as well, and debuts, they don't get much better. A 115 average in your first game. Was it hard to come down from that high of playing that well going into the next few games?
Yeah, I mean, it was great, but then I didn't really know how to react, because obviously not something I've done before. My first time there, my first time throwing that average. Normally I'd message my dad or someone, but you can't use your phone in there for like betting reasons, so I didn't really know what to do. I think I didn't come down maybe as quick as I needed to, and then when I did, I didn't get myself kind of reared back up to play. It was difficult, really.
Well, in darts, the averages, they get spoken about a lot, but that 115 to throw that when only 2 years ago you were averaging around half that. It's a huge jump. So I'm interested to know what you think as someone that has risen through the averages. What was the hardest average to crack? Was it breaking 50, 60, 70 or maybe higher?
I don't know, I think they're all difficult, but there's different things that you need on each one probably. I would say maybe 60 to 25 dart leg. So you need to score pretty straight and hit your double quite soon. So probably that.
Well, I'll let you know when I get there. I'm struggling to break 50 at the moment, but we should mention Matthew, the darting nerd. You've found some more fame being one of the players that he's followed on his popular Dart Connect reaction videos at Q School and the Challenge Tour this year. So how good is it to have that support from friends and family?
Yeah, it's really nice. Matt's a great guy. He does a lot for darts, in our area, and the support from friends and family has been great throughout. Q School, Challenge Tour, Development Tour, Modus. They're all really supportive of everything. So it's quite nice.
And this year started with your second trip to Q School. You make it through to that second stage. You went close to a tour card on the last day, getting to the last 16. So how did you reflect on this year's Q School, and what were the goals for the rest of the year after missing out?
Yeah, so my goal before Q School was just to make the second stage, which I did, and I was really happy with how I performed in the first stage. I had a really good set of results on the first day before I lost to Darryl with 110, so that was nice of him. He wasn't allowed back in the room. But yeah, I think going into the second stage, maybe I thought about it a bit too much, which it was my first time there. It's not a problem. It's something to learn from. My goals going forward, I wanted to win a title this year, and I thought maybe development, but now I want one on the challenge, I guess. Maybe win another one. And if I don't finish like top 2, 3, 4, whatever it is, on challenge or development, then to qualify for UK Open and second stage of Q School would probably be another goal.
Well, one of them goals that you mentioned, the title in the PDC, that comes pretty soon after Q School, winning on the Challenge Tour, and we know they can be long days. Just looking at the day that you won the title, the first event, you started just after 10 o'clock, lost around 12:15, then you're back 4 hours later to play the next event. How difficult is it to prepare for those weekends?
Yeah, it can be quite tough. Obviously, it's a long day. I think we got there about 8:30, and we left after I won the event at about 10 o'clock, so over 12 hours. And you just have to figure out what works for you, I think. So I went out pretty early in the first event of the day. So whether it's, throwing quite a lot, just relaxing, some people drink, some people like to have a meal almost, and some people don't. It is tough figuring out what works for you, especially because every day is different. But it was I managed to figure out something, I guess, and hopefully I can do it again.
Yeah, it worked out well for you that day, and the run to the title probably got lost by some. Your first game, 4-1 down to Wayne Jones, come back and win that one 5-4, and I think you ended up winning 4 deciders in that run, including the final 4-2 down to Owen Bates. You survived the match darts to win it 5-4. What are your memories from your run to the title?
Yeah, there was a problem with air blowing in the venue, so I really struggled in I think the first 3 games, as did everyone else. So I was quite almost lucky to win those because everyone was struggling. I think twice I was, twice my opponent missed match darts. I think Wayne Jones and Thomas Lovely, if I'm not mistaken. And then coming off of those games, I had 2 good games against Patrick Linsky and Christian Kist, which they were both quite tough games. And then onto the final against Owen. Owen's a good mate, and he's a very, very good player. So, I think coming back from 4-2, he hadn't missed anything, and he was scoring really heavy. I was confident that if I got a shot at double, I would hit it. but it was just managing to get that shot at double, which fortunately I did.
Yeah, and the title puts you fourth on that Challenge Tour Order of Merit after the first weekend, which is a good place to be. It's got you in the first 6 Players' Championship events of the year. When you get that call to play in the first one, what was your reaction to find out that you'd be playing on the Pro Tour for the first time?
Yeah, I was over the moon about that. I've been trying to find out or figure out whether I was likely to get in. Looking at last year, I think last year 4 people dropped out the first one, and then also looking at, did I know anyone couldn't make it? And it turned out I was actually quite lucky, because I think Christian, Kirsten, Andy Bolton went to the Euro Tour qualifiers. If they hadn't of, then I probably wouldn't have been in. So I was quite fortunate in that respect, but it was great. And
you've claimed a few scalps already in those 6 events, none bigger than Adrian Lewis on Sunday just gone. What did that win mean to you?
Yeah, that was really nice. Adrian, watching darts, since I have, he's probably one of my favourite players. So to then play against him, that was it was really good for me, I feel, and it was hard to not watch him throw when we were playing and just focus on my own throw, because I think he's got a great throw. But yeah, to win that game, it gave me a lot of confidence going forwards.
And you've played in 3 of these Pro Tour weekends now. What did it feel like walking into the venue for the first one, and compared to the Sunday just gone? Do you feel a little bit more used to it now, or is playing in a room with all those big names and at such a young age as well still something that is a little bit surreal?
I think when I first went in, I was looking around the room and I was like, oh, that's such and such, that's such and such. And almost probably a bit starstruck. But I think it's something that I realised I had to get over quite quickly, because you can't get drawn against someone and be like, oh, that's such and such, and almost be more worried about who they are or what they've done or anything. You need to just see them as someone else with 3 darts. So it's something that I've tried to get over quite quickly, but it is still quite impressive.
Well, a few more before we let you go, and let's look ahead to this weekend and what could be a very busy few days for you. 4 Challenge Tours on Friday and Saturday, then we've got Players' Championships on Sunday and Monday, all in Germany. What's the plan for you? Do you know yet if you're going to be playing in all 4 days?
Yeah, I'm playing all 4 days. Fly out tomorrow morning, so get settled tomorrow in Germany and try and give it a good go. I struggled a bit with a cold and flu this past weekend, so hopefully I come into the back end of that. So feel ready for it. Obviously, Challenge Tours, long days, so I'm going to need to be nice and prepared and ready to go for that.
And obviously the PDC's keeping you busy this year, but we see you play in ADC events as well, and I'm sure people want to know when you're going to be back on the Modus League as well. Is there any news on that front?
Yeah, I'm back at Modus a month from now. I'm there all week, so that's something I'm very much looking forward to. I played some good darts recently, and the first time at Modus is a great venue, and it's so well run, so it's something I can't wait to get back to.
Well, we look forward to that. And just lastly, I'm guessing from your Twitter page that you're an Arsenal fan. Are they going to do it and win the Premier League this season?
I still think it's too early. I've said all season that I think we'll mess it up and finish second, and they're starting to look a bit more promising, like coming back from behind against Bournemouth. But I'm still not sure. I still think it might be second.
We shall see. Well, best of luck to Arsenal and best of luck to you this weekend over in Germany, Cameron. And thanks very much for taking the time, and wish you all the best for what else is to come in 2023 as well.
Thank you very much. Thank you guys for having me.
Thanks to Cameron for joining us this week. Now we'll finish off with a pair of listener questions. This first one comes from Philip Davies. Philip asks, Peter Wright is currently provisionally number 10 in the Order of Merit post the World Championships. Do you think, though, he will rebound and finish the season inside the top 8?
Oh, that is a tough one. And this goes back, I think, to the start of the year. And one of the first interviews that Peter Wright did, I think it was during the World Series, and he was saying that if he can stay inside the top 10 at the end of this year, it would be a bonus. And you hear that from the world number 2. It does take you a little bit by surprise. But when you look at the prize money that Peter Wright's got to defend this year, it's just under 900 grand between now and the end of the season. And that includes the World Match Play title, the Players' Championship Finals title, and the World Championships. And then you factor in recent weeks, the UK Open. Okay, he got to the last 16. He was 2 legs away from making the final day, but the change of darts so often in 2 of the 3 games that I saw at least, and he was saying he doesn't feel comfortable with any darts. So it does raise concerns if you are a Peter Wright fan of how far he could drop at the end of this year. And obviously the World Championship money, 500 grand, that's not coming off until December. So he's going to go into Ali Pali still in that top 3, top 4 range. But if he goes there, having had a leading season with no deep runs in the majors, I think there is going to be a bit of pressure on him to perform and get enough wins at the World Championship to stay in that top 8 or top 10. And I'm a little bit biased as a Peter Wright fan. I want to see him stay out there as long as possible, but I'm not sure how much longer he plans on playing for. Could he walk away now if he wanted to? I think he could, but while he's enjoying it, there's no reason not to carry on and keep going and try and achieve as much as he can. But I don't think he's enjoying it at the moment. It doesn't look like he is. And I think he's hit a point in his career where he is searching for something again, maybe another set of darts to give him that buzz again and go on a run. And I'll say yes, I think he will be in the top 8, but I just think he is going to go on a run again at some point and have a weekend or a week where he looks unbeatable again, Phil Taylor-esque like he was at the match play 2 years ago. And there is going to be a lot of opportunities between now and Ali Pali, and we know he's going to be in all the majors barring a catastrophe. We're going to see him at Minehead again for the Players' Championship Finals, the European Championship. You'd imagine he's going to be in the Grand Slam again. So, and you look at his record as well, he's made a major ranking final every year since his first one, the World Championship at the start of 2014. And even the years when he dropped off and people were doubting him, 2018, 2019, that spell, he got to finals still. So I think he's going to do enough. It's going to be tough. This is going to be a hard spell for him to come through, but I think we're going to see him go on a deep run in the major, and I think we're going to see him in the top 8 come the end of the season.
I mean, it wasn't that long ago that we were talking about Peter Wright having won a World Series event. That's less than 2 months ago, where he won the Nordic Darts Masters, beating the world number 3 in the quarterfinals, beating the world number 1 in the semifinals, beating the world number 4 in the final. The only top 4 player he didn't beat was the world number 2, but that's because he is the world number 2. So he still has it. What's been missing is that he's the confidence recently, because he, and that's led in the last month or so to definitely a drop in his performance. Because for the first month after that, he wasn't winning on the Premier League stage, but he was playing really, really well. He was leading or second in averages through 3 nights, but was 0-3. Now the confidence has taken a hit, and we've seen him change to. I mean, we've always seen him change darts. We've seen him try darts that clearly are not the type of darts that he should be throwing with, that are completely different than anything we've ever seen from him before. And he managed to win with them. He managed to play at a high standard for most of that match before getting near the finishing line and dropping off significantly. So it's still there. The game is still there. And I think the drive is still there, which is why he's tinkering. We've barely seen him play in the Players' Championship so far this year. He skipped 2 of the 3 weekends. So there's certainly some questions that could be answered that aren't, because we haven't seen him play. I'd like to see him play some of those Players' Championship weekends again to try to get that confidence back and try to get some matches and try to get some wins back, because that's what he needs right now. He needs to just get some of that confidence back and get some of that belief back, or at least the belief that his game is where it needs to be. I think he still believes that he can and will rise again, but he's not playing like it. And right now, he's not getting the result. I do think he'll be in the top 8 at the end of the year. I mean, the last, you go back 2 years ago, he had to defend 500,000 pounds at the World Championships. And what did he do? He did it, and he retained the world title. He played the best we ever seen him play for 10 legs at the back end of the world final against Michael Smith to do that. So it is still there, and he's had this pressure before and he's lifted his game. And I think his goal is to play his best in November and December, or October, November, and December, and he'll put himself in that position. I'm not saying he'll win the world title again, but I think he'll defend a good portion of that money at the very least. And if he does that, he should still be in the top 10. He should still be in the top 8. Maybe he'll even still be in the top 4. But as you said, he'll have to get it to a major final yet again this year to really make sure he stays in the top 4 or top 5. But I do think at the very least, there'll be another year in the top 8 for him.
We shall see. Well, the last listener question comes from Nathan Barrington, who is the winner of our Premier League Last Man Standing competition. He chose a Michael Smith shirt as his prize, but he wants to know, whose Premier League shirt would you have chosen? And can you see a time when players change their shirts every season?
I mean, some players have changed their shirts fairly often. I mean, Phil Taylor didn't change it every year, but if you look back to the montage of his world titles, I think there's like 11 or 12 different shirts in there, which tells you he does change his shirt fairly often. And he changed it a few times after his most recent world title as well. So it's not, I think it's a player-specific thing. Peter Wright changes his shirt almost as often as he changes his darts. And he has that's part of his persona. It's having this entire appearance that is tailored, whether it's to the event or to the venue or to the season that we're in. So I think there are players who do that, but there are also players who wear the same thing for decades. Steve Beaton being a prime example of that. So I think it's a matter of personal preference. Obviously, as darts becomes more marketable, it already is very marketable at the top of the game, but it still is only growing in that regard. I think you will see players who see that opportunity, will see that chance to make more money by more often changing their shirts, having different designs, and selling, therefore, more merchandise. So I think you will see some players do that. But I think some players are just happy to wear what they're comfortable in and to build an image. The Michael Van Guren has that image of always wearing green. Dave Chisnell has that image of always wearing yellow. James Wade has that image of having a vehicle registration plate on the back of his shirt. So, players have their images, and you don't want to tinker too much with that when you do have it. But when your image isn't a particular look, but a particular persona like Peter Wright, it does make sense. And I think you will see some players try to do that to take advantage of the potential marketing. As far as which shirt would I have selected, I think I probably also would have selected Michael Smith, but I guess I would have selected all of them because I want all those shirts now if I have to pick. But no, I think Michael Smith would have been the one I selected of the 8 in the Premier League this year.
Well, I'll start with the first part, and it's a pretty easy one for me to answer because going off the last question, it has to be a Peter Wright shirt. I don't have one in my collection, actually. So, I think probably maybe the purple one when he won his first world title, but I do like the older ones that he had from his first run to a World Championship final, and this was when he was proper going for it, I want to say, because he had the matching trousers and shirt. And I think it was with Loudmouth, the close company back then, so they're probably harder to get hold of now. But as far as players changing their shirts, I think it is player specific, isn't it? Because, as you say, you've got Peter Wright changing his every game. You've got some players that are very consistent. Michael Van Guren has got the same colour green all the time. You've got Nathan Aspinall, Johnny Clayton with the black and red, and Michael Smith has got similar colours. Chris Dobie, Dimitri Van den Berg, they're pretty consistent with theirs, although I think Dimitri's has changed a little bit since he moved from Unicorn to Target, and that's obviously a factor as well. When players change manufacturers, it does mean a change of shirt as well, but some players, the shirt is more a part of their brand, isn't it? Because certain players are synonymous with different colours, but we are seeing some players mix it up a little bit. I think of this Premier League already, and I've seen Gerwyn Price, he's had a green shirt when they were in Dublin. I think he had a red shirt when they were in Cardiff. So players are more open to mixing things up a little bit. And I do like to see that. I think having the different designs, the different colours, it makes it different, of course, but doesn't make it look like it's the same thing you're watching every week. And I remember when we had Alan Glazier, the late Alan Glazier, on the show for our Darts Legends series a few years ago, and one of his nicknames was the Man in Black, and he wore a black shirt, and the sole reason was because everyone used to wear white back then, and he wanted to be different. So I think the Dart shirts, they have come a long way in the last 40 years, and I guess that's one part of the game we don't talk too much about, but when you think about it, the Dart shirt is an important part of a player's identity. You want to look good. So some shirts, they're more pleasing on the eye than others, but it is always good to see the new players coming through, what designs they've gone for, and then the more established players, how they're changing their look over the years as well.
Anything else for this week?
Just a few things. I want to say big thank you to our guests for joining us for their time. So to Matt and to Cameron, we appreciate them coming on the show. Big thanks to our sponsors as well, Dartwolf. If you want more Dynamite Darts content, head on over to dartwolf.tv, give Dartwolf a follow at Dartwolf180. And shout out to our other sponsor, Beer52. If you want a free case of beers, just cover the postage. Head to beer52.com/darts. Now that I've got my run out the way, I'm going to be sampling some of their beers this week. And lastly, thanks to everyone for listening, and enjoy the darts. There's going to be plenty of it for the rest of the week and going into next week. So you've only got to do one thing, that is make sure you enjoy it.
Yes, indeed. And I'm sure you'll enjoy it a lot more knowing that you're not going to get a single selection wrong this week since you didn't make any. But yeah, we'll be back next week to recap Sunday and Monday of Players' Championship events down in Germany, as well as to begin to look ahead to some of the Euro tours coming up and some of the other stuff going on in the world of darts, as well as to continue giving you my and Alex's brothers tips for the Premier League. Enjoy the darts while you can. Hang tight until you need to enjoy the darts. And then why not do both? Hang tight and enjoy the darts at the same time.